Kamisato Ayato is a Hydro Sword user that mainly fills the sub DPS slot, provides some Hydro utility we've largely been lacking in the game so far. My name is Blossums and welcome to another Genshin Impact video, and today we are going to be going over our Ayato build guide, going over his kit, some of his best weapons, some of his best artifacts, doing a showcase of course, and showing you some different teams that I particularly enjoy utilizing him. So we've got a bit to cover, let's go ahead and get into it. Now, looking at Ayato's kit, I did mention previously that he offers something we've kinda haven't had here in Genshin Impact for Hydro characters so far, and what that is largely in his Elemental Burst, where he has consistent Hydro application throughout his Elemental Burst that has a long duration that covers a very wide area. Now, we've had some other consistent Hydro appliers, namely in the form of somebody like Kokomi or Mona or even Xingqiu or something, but we haven't had one that covers it in such a wide area. He has about the same area as Ganyu's Elemental Burst, and it largely acts the same as well, just randomly hitting targets in there, and it has a duration of 18 seconds and a cooldown of 20 seconds, so you only got a 2-second downtime there, with an energy cost of 80, which is pretty costly, but you can make up for that with some good energy recharge and some proper energy funneling. But that is what he largely delivers that we haven't had in the game so far. Now, other than the Elemental Burst, what Ayato brings to the team is good burst DPS via his E skill that also covers a good AoE. This E skill, the way it works is you cast it, you leave a little watery illusion, it deals some good damage, but while you're in this E skill state, you now do blindingly fast normal attacks, and they're very cool and very quick, and they cover a pretty wide area, and you can just repeatedly use it. It goes pretty quick and covers a lot of enemies, and this also grants you stacks of this Namisen effect, and whenever you get enough stacks, you get bonuses to your damage based off of your max HP. So this is where most of Ayato's damage comes from, is going to be the E skill. You deal good damage in general, and then you get some extra stacks based off of your HP. It's very, very strong and very quick, and it has a cooldown of 12 seconds there and a duration of 6 seconds, meaning that although its cooldown isn't very long, you are going to have Ayato downtime, and this is why he really fits into that sub DPS slot, because during that downtime you're going to be using your other characters to do other things. Now, I did mention this Namisen effect on the E skill and how it gives you a damage bonus based off of your max HP. His passive here contributes to that by making it easier to get these stacks via whenever you cast it, you get 2 stacks for free, and then when the watery illusion explodes, you get the maximum number of stacks, and you can manipulate this to get the max stacks quicker, so there is like a little bit of a skill cap there. And then his other passive here isn't really as relevant. Basically, when he has less than 40 energy, he regenerates 2 energy for himself every second, which is okay. I mean, it's free energy, so you can't really complain too much, but it's not that crazy either. Now, I don't believe I mentioned this before, but the E skill also converts your damage into AoE Hydro damage and converts your normal attack into that AoE Hydro damage. So your normal attacks are replaced, just like Child's E skill. When he casts it, it just becomes Hydro damage for his normal attacks. So this basically doesn't matter anymore, and your talent priority is going to be your E skill, followed by your Elemental Burst, and then if you really want to do some normal attacks, then I guess you could do your normal attack, but you don't even need to level this if you don't want to, as most of your damage is going to be scaling from your E skill. Now, when we were talking about his kit, we were throwing a lot of different things at you, like HP percent, needing some energy recharge, the fact that normal attack scaling is going to be good on him, and that he wants Hydro damage. So we got to talk about some of his artifact sets here, and my personal favorite and pick for Ayato is going to be Heart of Depth, and this is because it contributes to not only his Hydro damage on his E skill, but the damage on his Elemental Burst. A lot of other sets either focus on one or the other, but I like this one in particular because it contributes to both by giving Hydro damage to your Elemental Burst and your E skill, and then you get a little buff to your normal and charge attack damage by 30%, but we only care about normal attack damage because that's all we're really going to be doing, and that lasts for 15 seconds. And from what I can tell, it also refreshes whenever you use your E skill, so although the cooldown on Ayato's E is 12 seconds, if you use it immediately after cooldown, it seems to refresh that buff, so you're a-okay to go. But we do have other artifact sets, as I said, have, you could easily go for other things, namely things like the two-piece of the Shimenawa's Reminiscence, or like a two-piece Gladiator, something if you just want to go attack. You could also go four-piece on Shimenawa's or four-piece on Gladiator, because these increase your normal attack damage. Now be careful with Shimenawa's, because as we mentioned before, that elemental burst does have a high cost of 80, so something like the Gladiator's Finale might be a little bit better where you're getting that attack and your normal attack damage increase just for free. There's no real cost there. However, as I said, these only contribute to your E-skill damage. If you want to lean more into his elemental burst because you like that side of it, I would recommend something like the Emblem of Severed Fate to help you out with some of that energy recharge and increase its damage. You could also do something like Noblesse Oblige, but that's not going to be helping your energy recharge as much. And then of course you can split all of those up any which way you want. Now there is one more set that seems pretty tailor-made for Ayato, and that came out at the same time, being the Echoes of an Offering. It gives you 18% attack as well, and then when your normal attacks hit opponents, there is a 36% chance that it will trigger Valley Right, which will increase normal attack damage by 70% of attack. This effect will be dispelled every 0.05 seconds after a normal attack deals damage. If a normal attack fails to trigger Valley Right, the odds of it triggering the next time will increase by 20%. This trigger can occur once every 0.2 seconds. So yes, this is fantastic for your E skill as well. This is going to deal really solid damage, but from what I understand, a lot of people have been saying that this is bugged in some way or another. So I would be careful of that, and plus this is a new domain, so you're likely not going to have as good of pieces for it, and it's not going to be substantially better than something like Heart of Depth or the Gladiator set or anything. So you're more than likely going to have a better Gladiator set already, or a better Heart of Depth set already, and I would just go for that at that point, rather than farming out really hard for a set that isn't even that much better. And one honorable mention is something like the two-piece of the Tenacity of Millilith. If you just can't get any good HP percent substats or anything, and you have really good substats everywhere else, then maybe you could consider a two-piece here just to get some of those HP substats that you are otherwise missing. If you can't complete another four-piece or something, just one little thing to consider there. Also, same thing with the Emblem of Severed Fate. If you just can't get any good energy recharge subsets, then getting a two-piece of that could help you out a ton, because he is going to need some pretty solid energy recharge. Nothing too crazy, just to make sure you're getting that elemental burst as much as you can. Main stats for Ayato are very simple. You can follow the traditional sub DPS method, because although he does scale off of his max HP on the E skill there, it's not like insane enough to warrant a main stat for it or anything. The scaling isn't that crazy, so just going attack percent, hydro damage bonus, or crit rate or crit damage is going to be the way to go, and then just looking for HP substats where you can is going to be the route you want to go. And talking about substats, the substats you're going to want to be looking for are, of course, crit rate and crit damage, attack percent, energy recharge, and then HP percent wherever you can fit it. EM is also not too bad, but I would prioritize those other ones first. And then, of course, if you just want your Ayato to be like an elemental burst bot and use that elemental burst as much as possible, consider using an energy recharge Sans. That is also an option. But remember that most of his damage does come from his E skill, and although the elemental burst damage isn't negligible, it's not worth focusing in and losing so much on the E skill unless you just really want to play him that way, which is totally fine. All right, weapons for Ayato, you've actually got quite a few choices here. Well, some of the best choices are, of course, going to be the tailor-made weapon that was on his weapon banner, which I believe is like the Haran Fubutsuku. I can't remember how to pronounce it. But that one is tailor-made for his kit. Of course, it's going to be fantastic for him, but another phenomenal 5-star option for him is going to be the Primordial Jade Cutter, because you get tons of crit rate, it increases your HP, which we already established is good for some extra damage, and you get extra attack from that as well, which is fantastic. You're already leaning in HP, so why not get more attack from it as well? This is actually very close to his tailor-made weapon, and the differences between them aren't really big at all. So if you already have this, then I wouldn't worry about waiting for a reroll on his weapon banner or anything, because you're good to go already. Not to mention that the crit rate here is fantastic. Now you could use some of the other 5-star options like attack percent options or some of the crit damage options. Those are going to be just fine, especially if they're rounding out your stats. That's fantastic. Those are good options. But he does have some good 4-star options as well, namely the battle pass pass weapon, the black sword is going to be really good on him because of course it does increase your normal and charge attack, and it also provides you some sustain there, gives you crit rate. This is a phenomenal weapon for him, and if you don't have any 5 stars to put on him, then the black sword is probably going to be your best 4-star option on him. There are also options like the Amenoma Kageyuchi, and besides the fact that it just goes with his drip so well, it does help him get his elemental burst back more, and the succession seeds seem to refresh one another whenever you use your E skill, which is really nice. I was messing around and testing that, and that seems to be the case, so you can manage to actually stack 3 and then use your elemental burst and get a bunch of energy back, which is pretty nice. This of course isn't going to be the best damage wise for him. You do get some pretty nice attack, but you are going to be missing out on things like crit rate or crit damage or getting any HP or anything. But this is really good for spamming that elemental burst as much as possible, and it's a really strong 4-star option for him. Things like the Blackcliff Longsword are also going to be pretty good, and I would recommend that if you just need some extra crit damage. You also get a little bit of attack. There's nothing wrong with that, and it's just pretty solid all around. But other than that, nothing is too crazy on him. You could try to use some of the other energy options if you really want to spam his elemental burst, but they aren't going to be near as close to damage on some of these other options that you have in the 4-star category. And I would honestly recommend Amenoma Kageyuchi for the energy rather than these, in my personal opinion, as I think this just goes with his gameplay loop a little bit better. One more other interesting option is actually the Skyward Blade. I kind of glazed over this a little bit earlier because the other 5-star options are better, and if you're using your Jade Cutter on somebody or your other 5-star sword on somebody else already, and you just have this lying around, this isn't the worst option. I would still recommend Black Sword over this, but the fact that this increases your crit rate and increases all these other things and increases your normal and charge attack damage after you cast your elemental burst is, well, pretty nice. So you are getting that bonus on your normal and charge attack damage after casting your elemental burst. You get energy recharge on your subset, making it much easier to get that elemental burst off of cooldown, which is very cool. So this is a viable option, but it's not going to be as much damage as some of the other ones, but still something that you can definitely use. All right, and before we move on, I'll go ahead and show off all the artifacts I have on my Ayato so you know exactly what I'm working with and where I got my stats from. As for the stats on my Ayato, I currently have him at 23k HP, 1900 attack, 63 EM, and we got him at a pretty decent crit rate and crit damage ratio here of 86 to 193. Jade Cutter's kind of cheating on the ratios, and my energy recharge is pretty low at 114. I do want to bump this up to around the 140 range, but that's just going to come with some good artifact grinding. However, I will say if I'm pairing him in an electro charge team with like double electro units for the electro resonance, I don't have that much of a problem getting his burst off of cooldown, and especially if I'm funneling him properly with another hydro unit or something, that is also something to consider there, to where you don't need nearly as much energy recharge. We're sitting at 61.6% on the hydro damage bonus, and that's kind of where my Ayato's at. He's doing really well so far, and I can't wait to min-max some more of his artifact. Teams for Ayato are luckily fairly simple, and the general rule of thumb that you can just kind of give yourself is he'll pretty much fit pretty well into where anywhere child would fit, is just like a pretty decent rule to have. But of course there are differences, as their kits are largely different, and namely if you're trying to do something like that where you're trying to put Ayato in some sort of situation that you would normally put child, like some sort of national variant, do know that it's kind of up in the air as to whether Ayato is going to be the one vaporizing or Xiangling's going to be the one vaporizing. When you pair him with somebody like Xiangling, that can get a little bit weird on the application of the elements there, so there is that difference there. But as I said, general rule of thumb, you can kind of fit him wherever child would fit, except he's not going to have the huge burst damage like child's elemental burst, but he is going to fill that sub DPS hydro application that child does, and being able to apply that hydro for your pyro units. Of course, Ayato having a huge AoE on his elemental burst means he's going to be pretty good in electro charged comps. This one's fine, however, you might notice there's no healer. We don't have an electro healer yet, so even though you want this electro resonance here, until we get an electro healer, you're going to be forced to have a healer in your last position there, and since you need a healer, you might not have somebody like Kazuha. You still could if you just want to ignore having a healer, but if you do still want a healer, of course, you could substitute Jean or Sayu in here, and Sayu pairs pretty darn well with Ayato, considering her elemental burst has a pretty large AoE as well, and you can just swirl within both of them, which is pretty nice. So that's a good slot in there if you're really into electro charge and you want to get that electro resonance or that extra energy. Having Sayu here to debuff the enemy with Viridescent Vener, as well as getting plenty of swirls off and be a healer for your team, is a solid option. There's also the fact that Ayato boosts normal attacks when his elemental burst is active, so characters like Yoimiya are going to be really cool for him because of the fact that while his elemental burst is going off applying Hydro, Yoimiya can get a boost on her normal attacks and vaporize those enemies getting hit by the Hydro. Yunjin is also going to be fantastic for Ayato because not only can she augment Ayato's damage, she could augment somebody like Yoimiya on the team's damage even further than Ayato's already is, getting that even crazier normal attack damage. So you could set it up to where you use Ayato's burst and then Yunjin's burst and then go to Yoimiya, and then you're just going to town with her normal attacks and dealing a ton of damage. So stacking those normal attack damage bonuses as well as the normal attack damage increase you kind of get from Yunjin, because it's not the same as a normal attack damage bonus, it's just more damage. So stacking those together can be really potent as well. Another healer who pairs pretty darn well with Ayato is Kokomi, because not only do you get the increase in the incoming healing there, which is nice, especially if you're using Ocean Hue Clam, but Kokomi largely works off of her normal attacks, especially in her elemental burst, meaning that they're going to be doing much more damage as well. So when Ayato's on his downtime, you could swap to Kokomi and just pop off with her for a little bit, and not to mention generate more hydro particles for the team, which is going to funnel into Ayato and feed his elemental burst. He can also fit into the classic Morgana comp for a freeze team, especially since I mentioned that his elemental burst does have a huge radius like Ganyu's, meaning that you can take full advantage of both of their elemental bursts that last long durations to freeze people as often as you like. Buffing the team with Kazuha and then having a healer slash shielder with Diona is also fantastic. However, I will note, if you don't have good energy recharge on your Ayato on a team like this, you might be struggling a little bit, because Ayato really is going to depend on the elemental burst being up to apply Hydro efficiently. Otherwise, you're really going to need to micromanage you swirling Hydro with Kazuha, and in that case, if you just don't have good ER or something, you might even want to consider swapping out your Animo unit or another Hydro unit, but at that point, why are you even doing that? You might as well just do something like this and add like another cryo unit like Shenhe there or something, but I digress. Basically, just keep that in mind, is that his Hydro application is solid, but it's not perfect, and you might need to augment it with either Kazuha or just making sure you have enough ER to get that elemental burst going as often as you can. Circling back to the fact that he increases normal attack damage, do keep in mind there are plenty of characters who you might kind of feel like you're normal attacking with, but simply aren't. Characters like Arataki Ito, Hu Tao, and Raiden Shogun are pretty good examples of this. Of course, you can normal attack with Hu Tao, augment her damage like that, that's totally fine, but for the most part, you're largely going to be charge attacking with your Hu Tao. Same with Arataki Ito, even though you are doing normal attacks in between, which is fine, they're not too terrible together. A lot of your damage is mostly coming from your charge attacks on Arataki Ito, and then Raiden Shogun, of course, her elemental burst, even though she's doing normal and charge attacks, count as elemental burst damage, so you're not really going to be getting the increase there either. Hopefully that helped you out with some of the team comps for Ayato, as he's pretty darn flexible and can fit in a lot of slots, but you do need to keep in mind how to most effectively take advantage of his kit of getting that normal attack damage bonus, as well as the fact that his E skill does have some downtime. Having a character that you can swap into to fill in that downtime is very important for your team. So let's go ahead and showcase him off so you have an idea of how well this Ayato build performs and what you can expect out of it. We'll go ahead and keep it pretty simple for this first showcase here. We're just going to use Kokomi to get the shield down, buff Ayato with Yunjin's elemental burst, and then pop off with Ayato inside of his own elemental burst, just so you guys have an idea of how much damage we are actually doing. Get his elemental burst going, and then get his E skill. You can see we're doing about 12k per swipe here, and our elemental burst is doing about 4k there, and that is generally what you can expect from Ayato. And do keep in mind that was with a buffed Yunjin there, so the numbers were just a little bit juiced, but yeah, you can make him pop off there accordingly and make him deal a ton of damage in that short little window. For the next segment of the showcase, we're just going to show off some floor 12 chamber 1 Spiral Abyss gameplay with a permafreeze comp, and then we'll go ahead and talk about our conclusions and go ahead and end the video. So yeah, Ayato's a really strong character. He can fit a main DPS or sub DPS role pretty darn well, deal good hydro damage in a solid area, and provide some hydro utility we just didn't have before. I will say the one thing that I'm really looking forward to is getting an electro healer in the game, which should be coming up pretty soon, because once we get an electro healer, that's going to open a lot of doors for Ayato's team comps, namely ones with like a fireworks comp, so then that way you can fit in Yunjin, Yoimiya, him, and the electro healer. I think that's going to be really fun, and I'm really looking forward to that. And if you made it to this part of the video, the end segment here, I wanted to give you an extra special thanks because you are helping out the channel the most. But other than that, hope you guys have a fantastic rest of your day. Thank you for watching again, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.